In this video, I'm going to cover how I use the compressor on our audio console. The main use of a compressor would be to control the dynamics of an audio signal coming in, or to control the volume of it. It can also be used to shape how what a sound sounds like once it gets through all the processing. So I have some tracks playing here. We're just going to jump in on a kick channel because that really helps emphasize what the sound is like. So here's the kick channel without any compression on it. So that channel just has a little bit of EQ done on it already, but there hasn't been any compression applied. So before we get into using the compressor, I just want to jump through the settings that we have available to us. So the first one on and this is the SQ6, we have the ability to switch between an RMS and a peak compressor. So the difference there is what type of detector it's using. Is it reading the RMS or average of the signal, or is it reading the peak of the signal? So is it coming in, is it just doing what's the loudest thing at a given time, or is it giving us an average? Generally it'll sit in RMS. This might be a good instance to use a peak. We'll just keep it at RMS. The next two settings are our attack and release times. And these are really important to shaping the sound that we want. So the attack time is how quickly after the sound crosses the threshold, which we'll cover in a second, does the compressor actually turn on? Does it start compressing at our ratio? And then the release is how quickly, once the signal has fallen below the threshold, does it take for the compression to let go? The other settings that I just started talking about here, you have ratio. So this is the ratio that the compression is happening. So when the signal goes past the threshold at a 3:1 ratio, which we have right now, it'll take 3 dB to go up 1 dB. And then we can increase that to 5:1. So now it's going to take 5 dB above the threshold to go up 1 dB. And then this goes all the way up to infinity to 1, which would be a limiter. It's just, it will not go above this level anymore. And this can roll all the way back on this particular board to 1:1, which is no compression. The next setting available is the threshold setting. So this is the setting to which, at what point does a signal have to cross to start compressing. So if I roll this down and lower this, you can see on our gain reduction meter that we're doing more and more compression. And if I roll this up, go higher, we're now almost doing no compression because the signal isn't getting high enough to cross the threshold and set it off. Just a little bit here and there. The setting underneath it is the gain setting. This is also known as makeup gain. And the idea here is that when we compress it, we have a signal that's like this. This is how the height of it for how loud it is. When we compress it, we're going to bring the top down towards the bottom and lower the overall volume. But then when we turn up that gain knob, this happens after the compression, and it just turns the whole signal up. At the top, there's also an option for soft knee. So if you can see on our graph here, there's a spot where the graph bends over, that's our threshold, and it's just immediately 5:7 or 5.7:1, or in this case 6:1 at that point. But if I turn on soft knee, it rounds it out. So you do more you eventually get to the 6:1, but everything before that point will just be less and less of a ratio until there's no compression. So you'll end up doing more compression, but just at a reduced ratio until you hit that point. On the SQ and several other ones, they also have the ability to do a sidechain EQ. This does not affect the sound of what comes out of the compressor. You're not EQing the compressor with this. This is specifically for what the compressor is listening to. So if you're trying to compress a certain input, but it's picking up sound in other frequencies that don't have much to do with that input, you can then use the sidechain to have it specifically listen to a particular frequency or a range of frequencies. So the options on here are a high pass filter, which we can roll up and down, and this is just removing the low end from the detector. So the really low stuff will not affect the detector, only stuff 100 hertz and up. Then they have a parabolic one, and you can just sort of move where the center of that frequency is. And then they have a low pass filter. So if you want to cut out the high end, so only the low end is what's setting off the compressor, this would be the option for that. So once you pick what you want, if you want to use that, you just have to hit the in button or the filter in to turn that on, and we can turn that off. You can also sidechain it to something else. So an example of that would be if we switch to the bass and make it a ducker. So this is a special type of compressor that just sort of lowers the volume of the input, and you generally key it to something else. So another use case for this would be if you have background music playing and you have an MC that you want to talk over the music, you can put a ducker on the music channel and have it keyed to the MC mic. So when they talk into it, it ducks the volume of the music. So if we put this bass, if we put a ducker on the bass channel and sidechain it to the kick channel, we can have the bass turn down a little bit when the kick is played. So we bring this in. So now every time the kick is hit, the bass is actually being turned down, in this case 9 dB, which is a little aggressive. But if I make that more, you can hear it. So you can hear every time the kick is hit, the bass is getting turned down. Where this would be more useful is up around like 3 or 4 dB. So now on your low end and your subwoofers, you can clean it up a little bit by letting the kick punch through the bass by ducking the bass out of the way of the kick. So that's what the side chain does. You can chain the compressor to a different input. And then this one I think is specific to Allen & Heath digital consoles. They have a parallel path. You can basically do parallel compression in one compressor. By turning it on, you can choose how much of the dry signal or the uncompressed signal goes through and how much of the compressed signal goes through. And you can mix those together to create the sound that you're trying to go for. And then the last button is the in button at the bottom here, and that just turns the compressor on and off. So we can hear what these settings sound like. I'm going to bring in that kick in mic, and we're going to adjust some of the, or we're going to adjust the attack and release times and hear what that does to the sound. So we bring in the compressor. I'm going to lower the threshold so that I'm getting a good amount of compression so we can really hear it. So I've got a really fast attack time right now. And if I turn this off, you can hear there's the beater hitting the drum, which is what we're going for with a kick in. If I turn this on, you can hear how it's now cutting out the beater hitting the drum. So that's caused by that fast attack time. We're not letting enough time for the beater to hit and the sound to come through before the compressor kicks in. So if we turn this up, the attack up, we should be able to hear that kick come back in. So now we're into milliseconds. So at about 22 milliseconds on the attack time, we've now let enough time for the beater to be heard, and then it starts to compress the back end. Now the next setting would be the release time, and that's how quickly does it let go. So if I turn this up, compared to it being off. By turning up the release to half a second at this point, we're running into a problem of it's not turning off before the next one is hit, and so then we're ending up compressing that beater again. So you sort of need to find where you want that release time to be, mainly to get it out of the way for the next sound, or if you want it to remove something or let something through. So for this kick in, by adding some gain here, we can turn the whole signal up, but we want to turn down sort of the reverberant part of the kick drum because that low end will come from our kick out mic. So if we bring our kick in again, turn our compressor. So that's compressor off. And then compressor back in. So you can hear that it sounds like the beater or the sound is shorter because we're sort of compressing the back end of it. And that might not sound great on its own, but when we mix it in with the kick out mic, it helps us emphasize the sound of the beater hitting. And then we can fill in the rest with the back end of it. So this would be compressor off, and compressor on. And so you may want a different sound than that, but you can adjust the settings to get the sound you want. But like I said, by adjusting this attack time and this release time, I can shape the sound into what I want it to be. And also help bring certain parts of it forward by using makeup gain. That's about it. You can apply these concepts to all of your other styles of inputs. The big thing would be the attack time is how quickly does the compressor turn on and compress our signal, and then the release is how quickly does it let go. And you use the little meter next to your input meter. That's your gain reduction, and that'll tell you how much gain you're reducing your signal by. And usually you generally sort of add makeup gain to compensate for that. So the compressor is turning down specific parts of the signal based on the timing, and then you boost the whole thing so then you can hear other parts better. Hope you found this helpful. There's other videos on my channel on similar topics if you found that interesting. And yeah, please check that out and have a good day.